Hi, I'm Karen Sutherland from Edible Eden Design, and today I'm going to take you on another food growing adventure experiment in my urban garden in northern suburbs of Melbourne, Australia. And I'm going to show you my Feijoa experiment. So you can see how glary it is because I'm blinking into the light, and this is only spring in Melbourne, early spring. So in summer, this area with the changes that climate change has brought to us, this area became very, very hot. And I was struggling 12 years ago or so to find something to plant in this area that would survive. And I came across these lovely long-armed Feijoa plants and thought, gee, they'd look really pretty and I could train them against the fence. They could look quite good. And I knew that Feijoas used very little water to produce fruit. I didn't have any in my garden. And this is a concrete driveway, which is very sensible when you have a gardening and landscaping business to be able to clean things up after you're working. It has bluestone edging, which is the local stone to this area, but it means that it has a really big retained heat bank in summer. And it's a very narrow area on the side of a driveway, so every little bit of space in an urban garden is important. And this garden bed, let's just measure it for you, it's very, very narrow. So this garden bed is not even 30 centimetres wide in soil space. Now I'm assuming that these plants have put their roots under the driveway to access some moisture, extra moisture and space to grow, and they're no doubt in the neighbour's garden bed as well on the other side, so that's an advantage for them. They were originally spaced at 1 metre apart. Now Feijoas are quite wide and relatively large shrubs, or medium to large shrubs, and they are characterised by being very rounded and large, and so they would normally like to get to, say, as a shrub, maybe 3 metres high by 2.5 or 3 metres wide, very rounded. As a very established old tree, they might get to 5 metres high by 5 metres wide. These kept in a really narrow space in 5 years of planting, and they were maybe 1 metre high when they were planted with only, say, 3 long arms. They, within 5 years, got to 3 metres tall easily. And they have wanted to get taller and they have wanted to get wider. So they've been pruned and pruned and pruned. They have been very productive. They have produced at least 10 kilos of fruit from these 5 plants. So that is a very narrow area where not much else would grow, and it's been a very prolific harvesting plant. I've been able to dehydrate them, eat them, share them with a local ice cream shop, gelati shop, gelati, shout out. Share them with a multitude of friends and neighbours, and put them out in the share basket when I've really got too many to eat. I've got another Feijoa in the back garden, I should say, so I get about 20 kilos a year. However, they've now started to come out, and it might be good to look sideways at this to see what that's like. You're starting to get these, this is talking about long-term management of your fruiting plants. So we've got some nice pruning here with some new shoots, but we've got a lot of sticks. So when I say it's become a bit sticky, it's not that it's sticking to my hands, it's just there's a lot of sticks. And it's becoming less nice to look at, like less of a coverage. So, I'm trained in ornamental gardening, so I like the gardens to look nice as well. But also, it's becoming difficult to manage. So I struggled to think, well, what can I do to move these plants to the next stage? This is one arm of this particular Feijoa, and I cut it back down to ground level because, of course, once these plants are established, you can do that with them as well. The point is that they take about 3 years to produce fruiting wood, so you can't do this yearly as you could with some plants as a coppicing. Oh, not with fruiting plants anyway, no, not with Feijoas. So this as a solution to this sticky, not as productive kind of situation, with more of the production happening at the top now, what we would do here is, and you can do this with a lot of plants, is cut them back hard, wait for the new shoots, and then we'd go through and select. So I'd be taking out the ones that are coming out to the front too much, and looking for 2 or 3 main shoots to train them back to the fence. And that's what I originally did with, so I'm looking for the shoots that are right at the back, so I'd be cutting off all of these shoots and training 2 or 3 of these back to the fence. And we did this years ago with some really cheap chain. It wasn't a really freestanding system like it should have been, so it did put a lot of pressure on the paling fence that we share with the neighbour, and so that's caused a little bit of friction. So as the plants have got bigger and waved in the wind, it's become more of an issue. They have become more strong and freestanding over time, and pruning them when they're more bushy, they're a lot stronger and don't tend to move around as much in the wind. You can see that the ties have a little bit become a problem as well, and that's something when you're training plants. You can see this one here. I need to cut that because it's starting to impinge on the branch, and you can see it's actually caused a bit of what we call cinching, C-I-N-C-H-I-N-G. And that's something you can do if you want to make something produce more fruit. I don't tend to like doing that because it feels like plant torture to me, but it is an established practice. So what we're going to do today is a whole different approach. Now the Feijoa plants are coming out and scraping on cars as they come through, because we do use this for car and trailer access. And also it's just not as productive, this area. And I thought, well, I'll try something different altogether. I could try just pruning back the side branches to shorter pieces, and I have been doing that for years, but it's become less successful. So I thought I'd try something quite different, and that's why we have the heavy duty pruners and a saw, because we're going to do some drastic pruning. And I'm going to remove all the bottom growth and just have the fruiting area up the top as a hedge. And so as a pruning method, this is called pleaching. And I don't really have anything quite as formal as this in my garden, but I thought it would just be a bit of fun and something different and a way to progress these, because I can't really take them back. You know, we can never go back in age to our younger self, unfortunately. But the Pro Feijoas, you know, they're progressing on in age, and I need to find a way to manage them so they're happy long term in the garden. So this is something we're going to now watch in progress. Before we start, we need to just use our little sharpener always. And this is easily done wherever you are. This is the little sharpeners that we sell on our web shop. Very, very cheap and extremely effective. As mentioned in other sharpening videos, I only ever go one way because it's too risky to cut yourself on the secateurs or the blade of whatever you're sharpening. If you go back and forth, that's definitely not the preferred method. These nice little sharpeners, as opposed to sharpening stones, they're much quicker and easier to use, but they get into the sharpening stones, it's very hard unless you have a very small stone to get them into the right into the bite of the secateurs. So I go along at the same angle as the blade. Do you want to get a close up of that? And then I can tell by gently rubbing the back of the blade if there's any metal being displaced, and I can just wipe that off very easily and get rid of those burrs. Give it another bit of a go. And this takes the pressure off your hands when you're pruning, when your secateurs are nice and sharp. And because this is a big job, we need some big tools. Now, these are called parrot beak secateurs. You can imagine the parrot. And I can stabilise them against my knee in this position and get a good angle at them to sharpen them. Oops, wrong side. Just trying to get the right angle that I'm happy with. Now these, this is something interesting to note. These you sharpen on both sides because they are not bypass. So bypass means that the blade, this part that I'm sharpening, goes past that part, the anvil. That's bypass. And I forget what the word is that's not bypass, but these ones you'll notice cut into the middle. So that means you sharpen both sides of this blade. So we're coming down to the very last bits. This is a bit of a, will we take this one off or will we tie it back? not decided yet. It's an undecided. These ones, you see the size of the stump that we took down. That was a big branch, but it was sticking right out, so it really had to be taken off. And all those shoots have been taken off that. So we're going to, I'll probably train up a couple of those and reduce those. Just reduce them back to 2 or 3 main stems and train them up. This old one can be taken out here because it's died off. Very hard to cut dead wood. Need to get rid of all these old ties as well, because often pests will overwinter in them. And they get to, that's a dead one. So you can see a really, really different plant here. This one also may need to come off. You know, you can always take more off, but you can't put it back on again. So if you're not sure about one extra branch, like this big one here, let's just leave it that little bit longer while we have a think about it. And this one probably can be taken off. But it's completely changed the look of this. And now you can see, because this is quite an old plant, more than 10 years old, that it has beautiful flaky bark. It's really quite pretty, and eventually that comes off and you get a really shiny, you get a reddish toned bark underneath. So it's very pretty. You can see some of it emerging there. Very, very pretty. Of this Feijoa celoiana, or Feijoa. These are not a cultivar. The cultivars look exactly the same. It's just the fruit that varies. And one other really fun thing that you might want to see here, where did it go to? Here it is that hiding in this little shelter, it's one that's already hatched, but there's a praying mantis egg case. And they like to lay their eggs, or put their egg cases and eggs onto paling fences, sometimes onto branches, onto windowsills, concrete pillars, just all the different places around our garden and house that they put them. So never remove those. I like to leave them even when they've got the little holes showing that they've emerged, because I love praying mantises, and I just like to be able to show people that's what they are, so they can recognise them in their own gardens and look after them. So have a look down this now. This is a solution for gardener happiness and engineer partner happiness. So this is the way you can modify a plant. I just thought there's not that much not that much information about what to do when things get older. How do you deal with them? How do you work with them ongoing? And I thought it was fun to show a very free-form espalier that had turned into a bit of an ungainly hedge that wasn't working that well in the space, still producing fruit, but just it was a little bit difficult, making life a bit difficult in a very busy space. And now we've got all the action up high and very attractive looking bark and just an interesting feature down below. Just wanted to show you one other little thing, actually 2 things. One is that when you're using these bypass secateurs, it's always really important to have the blade next to the side you want to keep. So you never have the anvil next to the part of the branch you're wishing to keep, because it can crush any future buds. Now, that's not as important in this case, but it's just a habit. And that's why all through the video you will have seen me turning my secateurs around as appropriate to where I needed to have the blade next to the part I'm wishing to keep of the branch. And another point is that we try to avoid what's called flush cuts. So back many moons ago in gardening dark ages, when I did my apprenticeship, we were taught to cut flush with the branches of trees and shrubs, but gradually horticultural science moved on and people realised that was actually a bad idea, and what that caused was the risk of, it caused a really odd overgrowth in some trees where you get callousing around a wound, but in shrubs or any tree, there is a danger of infection getting into that main part of the shrub, of the branch or the trunk. So what we do is we leave what looks like a little stub, but it's quite safe. You can cut that a little bit closer, and what you're looking for is something called, in technical terms, a BBR, which is a bark branch ridge. So you're looking for a little ridge in there that designates. It's not obvious on every single shrub, and tree. It's much more obvious in larger branches on trees. So you're looking for a ridge in here, which is, again, as I said, a bit hard to see. It's like a wrinkling. It's not terribly visible, but have a look for it on various trees and you'll see what I mean. And you don't cut behind that. So you can cut this one a little bit closer, just to make it a bit cleaner and tidier, but no closer than that. Because when you cut behind the bark branch ridge, you allow potential infection bacteria to get into this main trunk. So by cutting out a little bit further, you're allowing that little joining part of the plant, in not terribly technical terms, to occlude or seal off. So plants don't heal, like, I've scraped myself there, my skin will heal. Trees don't heal, but they shut off various areas to seal them off from problems getting into the rest of the plant. So that little bark branch ridge will stop infections or other pathogens getting into the main part of the plant. But if you cut that closer, you've cut off that protective gateway.